women's running. Women's running stories.
Hi, I'm Dani Moreno, and I'm a professional mountain runner for Adidas Terrex.
Yes, Dani Moreno is a professional mountain runner, and she is one of the best in the world. Her specialty is the sub-ultra distance, which are distances shorter than a marathon. Traditional marathon is 26.2 miles or 42.2 kilometers. But keep in mind here that we're talking about running over mountains with steep technical terrain, so these races are very, very different from a road marathon. And this year, for the very first time, Dani is going to experience what that is like because she is debuting her road marathon at Boston. She will be joining us in April, and we are so excited that she's coming to town. But before we get into Dani's story, let me welcome you to Women's Running Stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am your host and producer. And behind me is music created by Cormac O'Regan. He does all the original music and scores every single episode. And for this episode, we're getting into Dani Moreno's story. Running has been a big part of Dani's life and growth and development in many ways since she was a young person. And she talks about it all through youth running, high school, university, up until today. A couple things to know before we dive in. Dani currently lives in Mammoth, California, which is up at altitude. She used to live in Santa Barbara, California. She is an alumni of UC Santa Barbara, as am I. And another person who she does mention who also attended UC Santa Barbara is Stephanie Rothstein, who many of you may know better as Steph Bruce these days. She is indeed one of the best runners in the United States and has been for some time. You'll also hear Dani mention D1 and D2, and as a little reminder, those are divisions of competition in the U.S. college system. D1 is the highest level of competition, D2 is the next level, and so on. Real quick up here, I'll also give you a short update from me. I am happily training for the Boston Marathon. I'm getting in all the miles and the speed work and the weight training and the yoga and all the rest of it. It's going well. I'm staying healthy and happy and motivated, and I am really looking forward to running Boston this year. Not the least of which is because we do have a spectacular field of women coming into town. So let's get into Dani's story. Like I mentioned, running has been an integral part of her life and development since she was young. And this includes the time when Dani didn't run at all, which is where we're going to start Dani's story, at a pivotal moment just after she'd graduated from college. Here's Dani.
It was just a really eye-opening time in my life, I guess that's to say. And running was the farthest thing from it. I just wanted nothing to do with it. Even if there was an option to run, I would hike or walk because and I remember putting my watches away and letting them run out of juice and stuff and just not recharging them. I know at that time it was just very invigorating. It felt like something like a huge weight had lifted off of my shoulders because I felt like I could reinvent myself, to be honest, without running. And so I just started to fill my life with other activities that would stimulate me in what I thought would be somewhat of a similar way. And I would definitely say at first they did. And most of them were adrenaline seeking activities, like canyoneering and climbing, canyoneering, in the Slock Canyons of Utah, and climbing in all different places, and spear fishing. I got really into spear fishing, and I bought a motorcycle, and it was rebellious and it was just a life-changing couple of years. And I was also working as an outdoor guide and doing that, and I just felt like I was doing all these things that I was told I wasn't allowed to do. So it was just really cool to do that, and to experience like different lifestyles too that were just so different from mine. Like I had been so to the book, like get good grades, work a job, pay my own college, get my scholarship, try and get more scholarship money, try and, do well as like a teammate on the team, and like just constantly felt like I was checking all these boxes. And then here I was, with people who lived out of their van or on BLM land who like didn't answer to anybody. Yeah, it honestly was just like invigorating to feel like I wasn't following the plan and checking the boxes. But at the same time, I will tell you, like, I always say like 1 to 2 years, but it's probably closer to that year mark, that like I realized that that's just me. And like coming to terms with like that I needed to be okay that that was me. That had always been me. Like even as a child, observing, like I was constantly checking those boxes. I was always the one like listening and consuming information so then I can apply it to myself so that I can be better. And so while this like brief hiatus from that core self was fun, uh I just realized that it felt it felt chaotic to me, and I am not a chaotic person. So, as a child, I was really quite shy. I was also quite small for a good majority of my grade school years. I actually didn't really have a growth spurt until almost out of high school and then another big one in college. So, slow to progress in that way. But, always was outside wanting to play with my friends and my siblings. But yeah, we with being outside a lot, I ran. But with that, we also all played soccer. It was our family sport that we did together. It's what we did on the weekends, and I just really enjoyed it. Not just from like the friends aspect, but I always like was a pretty heady kid, and so watching the game develop and be able to contribute to plays, etc., was always really fun to me. But my first discovery of running, being a sport on its own, really came from these like jogathons that we would do. I think that's pretty common for kids in grade school, where you would all sign up to support a fundraiser, and your parents' friends or your mom's friends, whoever's friends, would donate like $1 for every lap you ran or something like that. And so I always just found myself always having the most laps, and kind of by a lot. And my strategy was just to not stop. I would just keep going, because in my head, the more laps I got, the more money I was fundraising, and I thought that was really cool. But it was enough to where like parents would, comment to me like, "Wow, you were out there running 50 laps. My kid only ran 10 laps." And so that was kind of like an interesting, I guess, something that I noticed. And then we also had our track team already starting in elementary school, which was pretty cool that they did start it at that age. And I always wanted to be on the track team, but I never quite made it. Like I was never fast enough, but I would be out there running all these laps. So it was kind of this confusing puzzle for me. Like, how could I do one thing and not the other? Obviously, I know the answer to that now. And then going into middle school is where, I finally had a chance to show off my skill set, which, I then realized that my skill set was that I just could hold a pace. I was a really, like, I was like scary quiet as a kid. And I think because of that, I became observant at a very young age, like really observant. And I would say it's to this day that's like something that I feel is a big identifier in what triggers a lot of my character development, is like me observing the world. And so yeah, as a kid, I was often wanting I would go to my friend's house, but like first and foremost, I wanted to like sit down with the parents and, talk with them. And then once I felt tired of that, then I would go play with my friends. And so I just felt like, I don't know, I just was about consuming and learning. And I didn't even really have to like say much as long as other people were talking. And so I think in regards to running, I just observed parents coming up to me and being like, "Wow, you're really good at this." And, something else to note is like I grew up in Downey, California. It's kind of south and inland of like main central LA, but it is technically part of LA County. And the demographics of the community I came from, it was not a running community at all. It was like lower middle class to lower income families. It was very rare that both parents didn't work. And, that time for exercise was very seldom and usually on the weekends when everyone would go to the soccer fields. And so you would see everyone's families and your friends and their parents and stuff like that. But outside of that, like I wouldn't say you were like driving down the street and seeing like runners all the time. And so for me, even as a child, for people to be telling me that like I was good at running, I didn't really know like what to look at, but I knew that it was interesting that people noticed that. And so in middle school, one of my PE coaches, her daughter had gotten a scholarship to Pepperdine University for running. And so she's the one that reached out to then my parents at the time saying like, "Hey, you should try and find her like a youth club or something in the area somewhere in LA because like she does have some talent." And so that was really nice too, getting that like validation from, a teacher or someone in that position, and me being like, and her daughter did it, so like she knows what she's talking about, sort of thing. And so yeah, my parents did find me a youth club in LA, and again it was a sprinters club. And so it was like me and one other kid that would do like the 1500 and the 3000. And then from that club I got like recruited to another club, which that one was based in Orange County, and that was quite a long drive. But my parents were so supportive of me that like they were willing to drive me there for practices and stuff on the weekends. I'm really lucky in that my parents have always been really supportive. And so what was cool too from being on that youth club is it was just so different from anything I'd ever experienced demographically and socioeconomically up to that point in my life. And in that community, it was in Tustin, like that was a running community. And like I'd be driving there and you'd see people running outside and stuff like that. And to me, I was like, whoa, these are my people. Not like actually, but I was just like, these are people that like to do what I like to do. Like this is a thing. And so that like only inspired me more before transitioning into high school. And I would say high school is like really when I started to come out of my shell. So high school, essentially I like came in as a freshman, and I think, partly due to perhaps some natural talent, but also having that experience with the youth clubs, kind of came out swinging to where, within like my first couple of cross country races, I was already receiving letters from colleges like UCLA and just all kind of like the big schools for running. I had already kind of captured their attention. And so to me, I just thought that was the normal. Like I knew that not the other runners on my team were getting letters, but I don't know, it didn't seem like that much of a big deal. And then going into my sophomore year, I started going through puberty, had a little bit of a growth spurt because again, I was quite small for up until that point. And then, probably gained close to 20-25 pounds like a lot of women do, and you're growing at the same time. And I just like I slowed down. Usually I think it was like, I don't know, 90 seconds to 2 minutes average. So like on my 3 mile, as a freshman I was running 17:30, which captured the attention of colleges and stuff. And so when I was going through puberty, it was like closer to like 19 minutes, sometimes even like 20 minutes, which like those are still really good times, but in the big scheme of things isn't like insane. But in that moment, as a developing woman, it feels like the end of the world. And I just started getting bullied by actually like I had a pretty big team. I probably had close to like 100 girls on my team, which was pretty common because my school had close to 4,000. So it was one of the biggest sports. But yeah, I just started getting bullied, saying that, I was never going to be fast again, or I was never going to do what I was doing before. And like, this is the end of my running. And that was really tough for me because they were girls that I like had originally looked up to. And luckily, like, my mom was able to really like help me through a lot of that, telling me not to listen to them. But my parents were also equally sensitive to me and like what I wanted to do. And, they asked me a couple times because I would like come home in tears, being like, I'm never going to be good again, and asking me if I wanted to quit the sport and, just go back to just doing soccer. And, at first, a couple times I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to quit, but like, let me try it again. Let me try it again. But eventually I just became more and more resilient to it and actually like started to see some progress by the end of the year. It was very little, but like enough for me. And I just kept leaning into it. So then junior year, I saw a little bit more progress. And what helped is actually those girls graduated. So the team started to like shift in its chemistry and stuff. And aside from my parents, like, I was really lucky. My high school coach, he just, I don't know why he got it, but he did. And it helped a lot of us. And he would always promote that we were going to get through it and that we were just getting stronger. Like, he never, ever talked to us about our bodies and what we were eating and stuff like that, which I'm really grateful that that was my high school experience because I ended up having a slightly different college experience. But yeah, he was great and always supportive. And if anything, he was always worried about us like not eating enough food. And so sometimes he would like bring snacks to practice, which he like definitely didn't need to do that. So yeah, I was really lucky in that regard. And then, my senior year, I came back stronger than ever, even beating my freshman self, and, ended the year with a lot of interest from colleges. So yeah, it was kind of interesting at the same time because, like, I was also bullied in middle school for running fast. And I just remember, people call me like steroid girl or that I'm cheating or, cutting corners, which to me, I didn't know what steroids were, but I just knew they were bad. And I had like such a strong morale that it would really upset me. Like, it's something so stupid, but as a middle schooler, it just like really upset me. So then, fast forward to my junior year as I'm like working through what I'd been bullied about, and then going into my senior year, to me, I'm like, you know what? People are gonna have something to say whether I'm the best runner here or the worst runner here. So I think, coming out of that, I just felt strong mentally and that I was excited about the sport. Kind of in that transition of being bullied, going through puberty, and then going through junior to senior year, I really came out of my shell. I wasn't shy anymore. I was able to like be up in front of classes and stuff and like really not care so much. I was starting to sing as part of our vocal ensemble. I was in a play and like just really starting to put myself out there. And I really think that I gained a lot of confidence for what at that time felt like one of my biggest life trials was getting through puberty. And it was like at that time that it's like, no, running is mine. Like, running is this thing that other people contribute to, but it also like helps me become like a more independent person. And so then I felt like that momentum perpetuated itself then when I felt like I stood up for myself and like chose the college that I wanted. Again, just coming from the area that I did, there was less than 10 of us from my high school being offered the chance to compete for a sport in a college. And then that narrowed down to like maybe 4 of us that could potentially go D1. And so it was very much, out of 4,000 kids, that's not a lot. And so I felt like I had a lot of voices in my ears at that time, from my like honors teachers, my college career counselor, my coach, my parents. I had a friend on my team where she was getting recruited, but for some D2 schools, and so I was potentially like thinking of that as well, and then myself. So it was really hard to try and navigate that time and end up choosing what I wanted to choose, because I'm like such a community connected person that I'm like, I should choose where everyone wants me to go, because then it's they helped me. Like, I wouldn't be here without them. Like, I was very aware of that. But then I realized, like, but they're not the ones going to school. Like, I'm the one going to school. I'm the one like living this day to day. And then there's also just like the economic factor of, should I just go to the school or pick a school that's offering me a full ride, or should I go to a school that I, maybe want to be at more? So inevitably I like weighed the pros and cons, and I actually had committed to Sacramento State because they were the economically best choice for me at that time, and verbally committed, and they had sent over the papers to sign. And I remember like sitting in this room with my college career counselor, and I just started crying because I knew that I actually didn't want to go there. Like, I liked the team and the coach, but I just like in my gut, I just knew that's not the place I wanted to be, and that I wanted to be at UC Santa Barbara, even though it'd be like more money out of pocket for myself. And I'll never forget this. I looked at the paper, I'm crying. I like pull myself together, and I hadn't told anything to the UC Santa Barbara coach yet. And I call him up and I'm like, hey, I want to go there. And, can you send over the papers today? And I just remember signing the paper. I mean, to be honest, I was scared shitless in the moment, but it also was very invigorating for sure. And like, I mean, I can picture that day like it was yesterday because of everything, just the magnitude of what I felt like I was doing in that moment. And I had not talked to my parents about this, like the initial intent or whatever. And it was just a very dramatic day in my family, we'll just say that. But eventually things fizzled out, and I did the official pursuit of there. So yeah, it was actually quite a dramatic experience, not traumatic. And like I said, like, things fizzled out, but it did create kind of this interesting dynamic between my parents and I then, until I left for college. And it was just like this sense of, becoming more and more of like an independent person who was ready to leave and like discover more of themselves. And, like most parents, you like want that to happen, but you also don't want your child to grow up. So I think that was like a good moment for just like my family as a whole in general, because, I ended up leaving, and I have never moved back home. Like, that was that time in my life. And I felt it, which was cool.
Greetings from Evergreen Podcasts. We're rolling out a listener survey, and we want to hear from you. The information in the survey will help us gather statistics and in turn make our shows more appealing to advertisers. I know most people don't like ads, but this is one of the only ways our shows make money and help keep their lights on. We promise it will only take a few minutes, but the impact on our podcasts will be tremendous. As a token of our appreciation, we'll randomly select one lucky participant each month to win an exclusive merchandise package from Evergreen Podcasts. Head to evergreenpodcast.com/listenersurvey to help a show and possibly get some free stuff for doing so. We can't thank you enough for the support. Now back to the show.
So yeah, so freshman year, I did have like a little bit of pressure on me because like, I was the top recruit coming in, and maybe if I played my cards right, I'd be, contributing to the cross country team and the track team that year, etc. But I also came in with like an injury from high school. Like I had like this knee tracking problem, which had just shown up when I started doing like my summer training. And so I came in like kind of on the sidelines, which to me, I had never been injured in high school. And so, yeah, it was an interesting experience where like I'd have these meetings with the coach and he'd like write stuff on this whiteboard and be like, all right, this year we're going to do this year, this year, this year, just like a very linear progression. And he just kept really hyping up that like I was quote unquote one of the best recruits, if not the best recruit to ever come to the school. And so while that was exciting, it just put a lot of pressure on me that, you know, the anticipation was that by the time I left the school, I should have every school record. With that being said, like I never said like, please stop pushing this pressure on me. Like I did like it because I'm like, that's why I'm here. Like I'm here to become the best runner I can be, and like I'm here to break these records and like help UC Santa Barbara do this, and this. I really liked the team at that time. Like I believed in the philosophy. Like they hadn't gotten any of the best runners, you know, from like any state or in the US, but they all just like had worked really hard. And when I was coming into the program, it was just after the generation of Stephanie Rothstein. She had just graduated and that team had gotten like 7th in the US and was the only California school like within that top 10, top 15 for cross country. And so I was just really attracted to that. And the coach at the time had just shared a lot of stories of, you know, girls who were overlooked by other colleges or didn't have the fastest PRs but are now All-Americans. And I just found myself really attracted to like that underdog, you know, storytelling. So yeah, so I was kind of injured, and then whenever I'd get healthy, I would get injured again because like just not really any sense of how to hold myself back. Like I just thought you're supposed to do everything hard all the time. And unfortunately, also my freshman year, because I was dealing with that injury, I got told that I wasn't like doing my part to look the part of a runner. And so I started not fueling myself correctly, which now, obviously, looking back, is something I wish I could have changed. I learned a lot from it, but it's like that is the complete opposite of what you should be telling an injured person. Like an injured person almost need as much, if not more, fuel than someone who's not injured. So yeah, that was really hard. And honestly, what saved me was like the girls on my team, like some of which are, you know, now going to be my bridesmaids this year. And it was like this, a couple of them, but one in particular, she just was very good at calling people out in the right way. And so like we were leaving practice one day and she just straight up told me like, you don't look good, like you need to figure this out, like. And maybe that would have been too harsh for some people, but for me it was like just right. And almost within like a couple of weeks I like started taking the steps to like fuel myself correctly. I started seeing like a sports psych on campus and stuff like that. So very tough lesson because yeah, that definitely caused a lot of injuries then going into my sophomore year. But then junior year I started to like gain some more momentum, was able to stay healthy, had one of my best years there and seasons and stuff. And then I found myself kind of like drifting back into that freshman path. And then kind of like was just the pendulum kept swinging extremes in both ways to the point where I just felt like I was just battling my mental psyche more than anything. And then eventually came out of it again, but was injured then for my 5th year. And that was kind of just like the icing on the cake. I was like, I'm over this. I'm never going to like quite figure this out. I'm either doing it the one extreme one way or the other extreme the other way. I can't find this middle ground. And I just like resented that I was there an extra year and I was just over it. And so like, I just went through the steps, just did what I needed to do to get by and graduated and like that was it. I was like, I'm not going to run ever again. I think something that eventually allowed me to move past that era in my running career and then now be where I am today is I just wanted results so quickly. Like, I was not invested in the process. You feel like you don't have enough time because that's also kind of what's preached to you is like, you need to be there next season. You need to be there in 10 weeks at conference finals, etc., etc., etc. Like, to me, I would just finish things quickly, move on to the next thing. I wasn't really in it for like the long haul, nor did I have like a full understanding of how that worked in athletics. And so I think that's why my pendulum swung so aggressively in either direction, is because it was like the quick thing, the quick thing, the quick thing. It was always like a band-aid approach because I felt like I didn't have a lot of time in my running career, being that like, if I don't become an All-American, I won't be a pro. And like, I just stopped running. Like, I just had no concept of that you didn't have to be an All-American to go professional, or that like you could keep running on your own dime. It was just so weird. Like, I even look back then, I was like, how come I didn't know more of this stuff? And like, maybe it just wasn't talked about. But it's just, it was like a void in my thought process of what could happen after running in college. I think for me too, like post college, I think having that space, or I have no doubt that like having that space without running to like really figure that out and like navigate my headspace and like how my brain works, only solidifies that like I needed that time before coming back to the sport, because I was able to like do it on its own without having my athletic performances like tied to it. So yeah, I graduated, and I think that my time working as an outdoor guide did a really good job of healing me and being in this like kind of outdoor space. But I was just around a lot of really strong women, like ocean kayakers and climbers and canyoneers, and they just all were so strong, and their bodies could just like take a beating. And I just really started to see the beauty in that. And like, beyond that, like they all just were so happy, which really stood out to me, thinking back to my college years. Like, my team was happy for sure, but you would see kind of nuances here and there, and not just with our team, like the other athletic teams too, and like people just really trying and struggling to find that balance of just fueling and like nourishing your body in that way, and that's great for you. So yeah, it was as I'm like chowing down pots full of food as a guide, and my ability to, carry 2 kayaks on my own without anyone's help, or my ability to like throw a kayak on top of a huge van, and just like I could feel my body getting strong. It just clicked so fast in my head that like that's what I needed. Um, yeah, I just needed to eat more food, but again, like I just felt like I had not a lot of guidance around that. I've really been fine ever since, which has been great. And been able to have really good race experiences when I eat to my like eat as much as I think and more. So a couple things were happening during that time. I was still like on this rebellious kick, but it was kind of just like I started at first I was like, I'm not going to run. And then I started to go through like this denial phase where like maybe I still liked running, but like I would say out loud like I didn't want to run. There's no way like I'm still gonna do that. And so that was this era of like I would like jump in a couple races here and there, but like I would never train for them. And then eventually the realization that you could win stuff. That's what it was. that I could win stuff, because I couldn't win stuff as a collegiate athlete. And so I started to realize that like I didn't need to be a professional, but like I could still just like jump into a race and like win a couple $100, and like I got to keep that money. And so I'd done that for like a couple races here and there. And then I'd gone up to San Francisco with some friends, jumped in a race. And then, then I was sponsored by Hoka. And again, like realizing that I could win money. It was such like a contrasted time in my life where I both not hated running, but had somewhat of disdain for proper running, but it, kind of somewhat inspired by these like vagabond types of lifestyles that I was constantly surrounded by and attracted to. If I could do that and like win here and there, pick up money, like maybe this is the perfect balance for me. And so during this, rambunctious, first year of trail running where I'm just like, I don't need to train. I can just like show up to the start line. Like I got away with it here and here and here and here. And then eventually I didn't. And to be honest, like I think I just realized that my college fitness had run out, because had built up a good base over college. And I was just kind of like running off of that. And, I got beat once, and then or I got beat really well, and I was like, maybe I should try a little bit harder. And then I tried some more, and then I got beat again quite a bit, and I was like, all right, maybe I should have some organization, because now I was starting to care. Like now it started to bother me that I knew that I was coming up to the start line with like 1 to 2 runs under my belt or something like that. Like it was starting to bother me that I knew I wasn't showing up as my best self. And like I need that order in my life. I need to have goals. I need to have milestones, and like I need to see progress against my progress chart, and like that makes me happy and that makes me feel fulfilled, whether it's running or something else. So that's when I started to kind of look for a coach, and, eventually landed with the coach that I now have 6 years later. Yeah, I just started caring more. What was nice is I also felt like my personal relationships were elevated when I started to care more. I kind of, while it was fun to be rambunctious and rebellious and kind of away from my core self, I also kind of felt disconnected from those that were closest to me during that year or so. So I started to care more, and one of the biggest reasons for that is my coach. Like he never put any pressure on me, but he was just kind of this very selfless human who was willing to wake up at 6 a.m. to come meet me and train me, and just doing it out of the goodness of his heart. I'd actually like ran with his wife a couple times before I even met him, and like realized the connection there. And so Terry Howe just like became this rock in my life that I didn't know that I needed. But now I just cannot live my life without him being there in some capacity. Terry also immediately reminded me of my high school coach when I started to work with him, because like I would do like these sessions with him, and we'd finish up, he's like, all right, like hope you're going home and like eating like a bunch of food, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, cool. Like not it, like really, I'm like, why does he keep saying that? And then it would start to click. I'm like, oh. And what also helps is he also actually works in the health food industry, and so he just like started sending me all these articles on protein synthesis and like et cetera, and in a way of like, you need to be eating this much food. Like I know you think you need to eat this much, but you actually need this much. So yeah, essentially to him, he talks to me as if I'm still not at my peak, and like I still have a decade of running, and like so like for him, like I don't need to be there yesterday. Like we are there when I get there naturally and at a good pace. So again, just going back to him being unselfish from those first few days and weeks and months we worked together, because I wouldn't have blamed him if he was like, oh, this like fresh out of college girl is wanting to run. Like, let's just pile on the work and like see if she can crank out, some good marathon times or whatever. But he just was never that way. He was just really conservative with me when he first started coaching with me, even though I was so confused why he was. And now looking back, I'm just so thankful that he was. But in college, I was running 80, 90, 100 miles a week, which is probably a large part of why I was injured all the time, looking back retrospectively. But in the moment, I thought that's just what everyone does. So when Terry started coaching me, I mean, I was running like 50 miles a week, which, is still good mileage, but it was so I was just like, you're only having me run 50 miles a week. What the heck? Like, I should be running more. And he just like was really good about holding me back. And so, 50 to 60 and then 70s, and like even my mileage now is like still in that kind of like 80s range, but I just have been able to stay healthy all of these years. And so each year we've just kind of like gently, quietly built more and more on my foundation as a runner, and just like the results and the resume and stuff like that. Just constantly turning over stones. Like, it really wasn't even until like a couple years ago that I started doing like, more intense weight training and stuff like that. But through it all, he just like really believed in me and like what I could do, but also never put pressure on me when, things got hard at work or I had to adjust for one reason or the other. And so I would say like the more recent results probably have a lot to stem from me choosing to commit more time, but like prioritize running, and also just like moving to altitude and having access to terrain that is more mimicking of the type of running I like to do. And then my hunger, as I've become more, it's almost like the more time I give to the sport, the more I want to challenge myself.
And one of the ways to challenge yourself as a mountain runner is to go over and race in Europe. And the hub of some of the most spectacular racing in Europe is Chamonix in France. It has very largely become this hub because of the series of events called UTMB, which take place each year at the end of the summer. And that's where Dani headed last year for the first time, which she's about to get into. To give you a little timeline here, she also mentions the Mont Blanc Marathon, which took place on June 26th. She followed that up with the Sierra Nazal race, which is a big race on the calendar as well. It takes place in Switzerland. It is a 31-kilometer or 19-mile event, which happened August 13th. And then the big show. She went and raced the OCC, which is part of that UTMB series. That race took place on August 25th, and it was the longest distance that Dani had ever raced at 55 kilometers or 34 miles. And it does indeed finish in the town of Chamonix. That was also true for the Mont Blanc Marathon, which went over some of the same terrain as OCC. And a lot of this scene was totally new to Dani.
I mean, like, I've heard of Chamonix being kind of like this mecca, and to be honest, it just kind of like intimidated the heck out of me for years, where I'm just like, that's where the really good people go. I don't belong there. But then, as I started to gain confidence and stuff, now I'm like, oh, that's the only place I want to be now. I just want to be there and racing and in that area. And so, going into last year, OCC was going to be like my AA goal, and seeing if we could get to Chamonix before that. And so Mont Blanc Marathon was the obvious choice. And so what was nice is like, I had a good amount of confidence going in, and I was just ready to go. I was excited. Yeah, just was ready to race aggressively. So I got out there, was kind of in the lead pack. About almost at the halfway point, kind of lost the lead pack, which was like a tactical error that I don't plan on making again. But I was just so hungry, and going back to, the more time I've put in, the more hungry I've been to race bigger races. Like, that's even what I've learned to channel for my racing itself, in that the more training that I've put in, like I just feel like I want to represent that, and just more so for myself to like feel like I'm closing a chapter on that training cycle. So I started working my way back up and just really dug into not just that training cycle, but the years and years leading up to that. And I came here because I'm ready and I know I can compete. And eventually, went back and forth with third place all the way to nearly the finish line. For that would have been like the last 10K of the race. We were just constantly back and forth, and I have so much respect for her, and I know she is of me, because we just literally brought everything we could out of each other to get to that point. So that was, it was very satisfying. And then I got to share the podium with two of my best friends in the series, which it's one of those surreal moments when there's crowds of people and you're up there with your friends just like hitting each other with champagne and being like, how is this my life? Like, this is really cool. Like, Mont Blanc Marathon, it's a zoo. I would say is very similar to maybe like the Chicago or New York City Marathon. Like it really is quite big, and in the mountain trail running space, I would consider it like a major. But UTMB is just like, it's like that, but like for 10 days straight. And there's just so many more people, like seas and seas of people. And what's even wilder that I didn't know until this year is that people hike the Ultra Trail Mont Blanc Trail, because the route of UTMB is a world famous trail. I mean, that's how it began. And so people will hike that and time it with race week, to where they're either coming into town, finishing it right before the entire week, or where they're hiking during the week so like they get to watch the races. So that's just like a whole different component, where like we already have fans on the course, but then you like tenfold it with international hikers. So it's just really cool. And the fact that it like goes through, it incorporates 3 different countries is even wilder to me. So there's literally people cheering over the space of 3 different countries during this race week. And it's huge. And it's also the unbespoken world championships for the 50K, 100K, and 100-mile distance. Everyone shows up. I would say 98% of athletes in our sport are incentivized this by their brands if they are professionals, and it's a huge bucket list. So I'm so glad I did Mont Blanc first, though, so that I felt like it like a little warm up to the experience, because everyone just kept saying like, go out to Mont Blanc and see how that feels, so that when you come to Ultra or UTMB week, like it's not a shock to the system, because it's not only the races, but depending on your sponsor, which I was with Hoka at that time, we had stuff all week, like signings and runs and like meet and greets and stuff like that. And so you have to like mentally be ready for that, and also be ready to like recover from that as well. So it's very pleasantly busy the entire week. But yeah, that being my longest race, I was just honestly really excited to challenge my body in a different way. It was much different from Mont Blanc in that, like, I came into Mont Blanc in what I thought was a really, really good space, like physiologically, physically, mentally, emotionally. Work had been very steady, which is really nice for me when work is steady. Whereas OCC was just like the complete opposite, where, work had been very stressful, and I had lost someone really close to me just a few weeks before Sierra Now. Went and raced Sierra Now like literally a couple days after the funeral. That went as well as one would assume, like a smart person, not like me who thought I could pull it off. And so that was really just really hard, where, emotionally I was drained, and then physically I wasn't able to perform, largely due to the emotional aspect. So I came into OCC just like pretty weathered, but just so grateful at the same time, because I did have time between Sears Now and OCC where I felt like I was able to refill my cup. My partner Mike came out, which was so helpful. Some of my friends from the same town that I live in, who also happened to be racing, were there, so it felt like very at home and surrounded by love. And so I really felt that I was able to utilize the tools that I did have for that race day. Yeah, I had a plan with my coach and I stuck to it. And as the race is happening, and I felt better and better as the race was going on, and feeling like the fact that you trust your gut is working is like validating during the race and only gave me more confidence. And where it got to get really surreal is I'd gone from like 20th to 4th in like the middle section of the race, and I just was passing people feeling like they were standing still. And obviously I have empathy for that because I have also been in that situation where someone passes me and it feels like I'm standing still. To be on the other end of this in this race was quite nice. And so yeah, I moved into 4th, and then I finally caught the glimpse of one girl, Allie Mack, who is a phenomenal racer, and I'm sure will come back with a very big vengeance this year. And so I passed her kind of going up the last hill and just got extremely hyper focused. And I was like, very aware that I am now on the podium based on what I'm hearing from people, but I just need to keep going because you just passed Allie Mack, and like Allie Mack is very tenacious. Like she could come back at any time. As a racer, she's extraordinary. But not only her, like there's 3 other girls that I know based off of people talking to me, like we're also moving up the field. And so I just felt like I had a huge target on my back, because when you move into podium at those races, it's like that is a big goal for a lot of people, including myself. And I just wanted to protect that with as much as I could. And so that whole, I crested the last hill, which is La Flégère, which all the races go through, and it's just such a iconic spot. And I also did it for Mont Blanc Marathon, and then started on the downhill, which felt like forever. And I just remember multiple people with GoPros, all realizing I'm 3rd place and, telling me to go faster, and I just could not go faster. Like I was so excited, and I was in so much pain, and I just had this extreme tunnel vision that in my head, like if I went faster, I would definitely fall and just like cramp up on the side of the trail and like become, 20th place again was my fear. And so I just kind of sustained in that place of hurt through the rest of the race until I crossed the finish line.
Dani finished 3rd at OCC. Like she mentioned, this is the equivalent of the World Championships for this distance, and Dani was on the podium. She had also gotten 3rd at that Mont Blanc Marathon, firmly establishing her position as one of the best in her sport. And coming off of that high, she's now looking forward to that whole new challenge, which is going to take place on the roads of Boston on April 17th.
Yes, so Boston Marathon, that is kind of years in the making. I've told my coach multiple times throughout the years that I would eventually do a road marathon, and we got close a couple of times, but I then would, kind of waver and end up choosing a trail race instead. But yeah, he kind of held me to it and got me in a corner this time, which is really funny because I told him if I did Boston, then I really can't talk myself out of it. And he said, challenge accepted. So, he reached out to the elite coordinator with like my PRs and stuff, and I got in. So, yep, I'm doing it this time. I'm really excited. And, a lot of people have asked me, like, why did you choose Boston as your debut? And I think it's just kind of intuitive to my personality. To me, Boston is kind of like a puzzle that I know not everyone gets their first time, if at all. And it intrigues me. And I like how there's, various parts of the course that are very different. and you have your downhill, and you have your heartbreak hill, and then you have more hills here, but then you have like a nice 5K here. So to me, it kind of like is a touch of reading a mountain racing profile. Obviously, running minutes faster per mile will be probably the biggest challenge. But yeah, overall, I'm really excited about it. It'll be a new experience that I'm excited to try and figure out. And my parents are coming out, and my fiance, so it'll be a family affair.
Well, again, we are so excited to welcome Dani to Boston. Thank you so much, Dani, for sharing your entire running story. I was so captivated by Dani's story because she's had so many experiences and she's so thoughtful about how she's progressed through the sport. I'm just very appreciative of her time and for her sharing her experiences. And now I know you're going to want to follow Dani. You can keep up with her on social media. She is on Instagram at Dan_Yell_A. And she's on Twitter at Dani Runs Trails. That's DANI. She also has her own website. It is Dani-Moreno. Again, DANI-Moreno.com. You'll find links to all of that in the show notes. And I'm also going to link to a video that you can find on Dani's website. It is all about the Mont Blanc Marathon, and it gives you a sense of how incredibly popular these races are over in Europe. It's really quite a scene. And that's going to do it for us for this episode. But before I go, of course, thank you for listening. We love telling these stories, but the power of them is in you listening and in you sharing. I would really appreciate if you share this episode or the entire podcast with someone who you think would like these stories too. And I welcome you to follow us on social media. We are on Instagram and Twitter and on Facebook. I will have links to all of that in the show notes. And know that I do not make this show by myself. Like I mentioned up top, Cormac O'Regan does all the original music, and he scores every episode. He does that from his studio in Cork, Ireland. April Mariner of Bonfire Collaborative does all of the graphics for the show, the logo, the Instagram posts, the website, all of it. And you can find April at bonfirecollaborative.com. I am Cherie Louise Turner, your host and producer, and as I usually do, I am coming to you from my home closet studio in Somerville, Massachusetts. Thank you again for being here, and until next time, I wish you healthy, joyful strides forward. Women's running. Women's running stories.
Hear Her Sports is a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery, a former professional cyclist. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. Join us for inspiration, for community, and for love of being a strong, athletic woman.